Before we get to your scheduled video, please remember that likes and comments tell YouTube to promote our work to other people, and subscribing to the channel tells you when something new drops. You can also head to the link tree in the description to peruse my books, join us on Discord, or support us on Patreon. You can get episodes of Journey of Wrestling and Violent Profiles early, as well as a load of other treats. Even just $1 a month earns you a name drop for being cool. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the show. Greetings and salutations, fellow people who could conceivably be the star of the show called The Mandalorian. It is I, Eric J. Chucci, joined as always by the boy.
Hey.
This is the Two Nerds Podcast. Today we're talking about, and this may surprise you, Season 3 of The Mandalorian. But before we get into that, do you know who's cool?
Passion Killer 711, a guy from Ohio, and Rob, last I checked.
Questionably on that last one, but here we are.
He does his best, I'm sure.
I'm sure he does. Yeah, we're here. We don't want any more bears.
Hit the outro song.
We don't have one of those anymore. It just goes to static. I feel like I'm Doug Funny writing a book report. Silt stands alone on my notepad, followed by an ellipsis, and I'm...
The Mandalorian has been... You can listen to our previous podcast on the first season. I don't remember specifically that we did one, but I laid dollars to donuts that we did.
If we didn't do one on the first season alone, we did a combined one on the first and second seasons.
There we go. We did at least one on the second season, and the Book of Boba Fett, which contains within it Season 2.5 of The Mandalorian. And from those, if you don't feel like going back and listening to all of them, please do so. Like, comment, subscribe, and all that. But if you don't want to do it right now... we can summarize our thoughts on what preceded this season. How did you feel about The Mandalorian as a show going into watching it?
Oh, going before I even sat down to watch?
Like before, because we both did the same thing. Neither of us watched one episode of this until they were all out so that we could binge watch it as is proper.
So are you talking about me going into Season 3?
Going into Season 3.
Okay.
How did you feel about The Mandalorian as a show?
I was pretty sure we were going to get some TV. We were. Some good TV. I was, let's say, a little excited. Nothing intense. Not like frothing at the mouth or anything. I didn't sit down with a Grogu plush doll that I do not own and, queue up the TV with a bucket of fresh macarons for my consumption. But I was looking forward to something entertaining.
I felt, honestly, pretty much the same. I really liked The Mandalorian Season 1, and I liked Season 2 more. Notably, Season 2 has, within it, the best Star Wars movie. I've said that for a few times. The Mandalorian is the best Star Wars movie. So I was actually super excited. My excitement was dampened a little by having to wait so damn long to watch it after it started, but I knew I'd like it better if I could just binge watch it, and I was right.
Thankfully, we are both pretty much off of social media. I have a couple that don't really do spoilers for anything,
and notably at this point in my life, I don't actually care that much about spoilers.
I just know how hard it is for me to enjoy something in a vacuum.
Oh, it's perfectly valid to care about spoilers.
Sure.
I just don't.
Well, it's not, like, I'm not a child, you know what I mean? Like, I've had plenty of spoilers for Critical Role as I've watched it and the TV show, and I was still fully capable of enjoying it.
Right.
There are just certain things that I would rather...
experience genuinely.
Yeah, experience in the moment and have my first experience with it in the moment. And there are things I'd rather not, for that matter.
Speaking of, if you join our Discord, about the only spoiler I really care about these days is wrestling spoilers, and that's because I watch that with friends, and it kind of ruins the group experience if one of you has spoilers.
That is true, wrestling spoilers. And you're welcome to join our Discord, hang out, chat, or just lurk like everyone else. We're happy to have you, lurkers.
It's really nice to have people. It's always baffling that anyone cares about what I have to say about stuff. Speaking of, what did you feel about, just generally, Season 3 of The Mandalorian?
I'm going to do a comparison to She-Hulk, if you will.
I will.
I think everything up until the finale was fine. And then the finale was good. And I think the finale was good enough that it colors my opinion of the rest of the season, which was, and I cannot stress this enough, fine.
I thought the series, season 3, was a tonal shift away from the first 2 seasons.
I agree.
It was less dour. It was more fun. It did not quite rise to the level of Book of Boba Fett in terms of goofy hijinks. But it was a more... I wouldn't even say there were more jokes. Everything was just less... It felt less harrowing.
If I may?
You may.
The comparison I drew and the realization that made me more comfortable with the rest of this season was that this season was not a Western or a samurai movie, which the previous seasons have drawn comparisons to. It was... I mean, closer to your average Star Wars, it felt like a Dungeons and Dragons campaign. There were quests.
We make that comparison a lot.
Sure, and sometimes we mean that tonally in terms of, wow, this feels like a real party. You know, I can see my friends playing each of these characters. That is not what I mean here.
I would say this feels more like like the first thing you said is probably closer, right? It's a Star Wars movie. It's an adventure story.
It reminds me a lot of the Knights of the Old Republic games as well.
Buck
just
Rogers,
in terms of,
sort of.
Sure, not as pulpy, not as over-the-top heroic, because Din Djarin isn't an over-the-top hero.
He's still a very stoic guy, ultimately. But, that's none of what I'm saying is necessarily a bad thing. It's just tonally different.
I could think of a worse way to spend 8 hours.
Yeah, this was certainly a good time. It didn't quite hit as good as the first 2 seasons because I really loved the samurai western flair of the first 2 seasons.
So it's like a distillation, right? Like the original Star Wars was based rather strongly on westerns, on samurai movies. I don't think it hit that comparison quite as well as the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian did, but the 3rd season and most other Star Wars properties feel like a distillation of that original distillation. You're dealing with some really, you know, it becomes its own thing. It's concentrated Star Wars. It stops being of its component parts, and now it's its own thing.
In that way, it really did feel like it hit the vibe of like the other Star Wars material. It brought in a lot more of that old style like adventure pulp, like not quite frolicking good time, but like up and at 'em, let's go, have a good time, don't spend too much time worrying about anything good time.
Shall I say my catchphrase?
Yeah, go ahead.
I would compare it to what else I've seen that Filoni has done.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. Whereas the first 2 seasons very much felt like their own thing.
Yes.
Again, I liked it, but it just didn't hit as well with the tonal difference.
I wouldn't put it on the negative scale, but I am hesitant to give it recommendative praise.
I'd say if you like the first 2 seasons, watch it. It functions as a really good... Well, I would say it functions as a really good finale to the series. Except, according to the internet, it's not gonna be. Season 4 is already written.
And of course we're getting a movie.
Right. But I'd say this honestly could function pretty well as a finale to the series. It wraps everything up and establishes a new status quo. It ties off the various story beats from the previous seasons and really gives us something fresh to go with. That's why it feels like a finale to the series, and why I'm a little worried that they're going to be making more.
You know, same. And there's a strange happenstance here. If you guys look at our other podcasts that we've put out, if you've been with us for all this time, and you look at our favorite movies, oftentimes the 3rd movie in the series is our favorite. We like trilogy enders. We're big fans of climaxes. Climaxes?
It's, you know what, there's too many jokes. We'll go with whichever one you like.
Orgasms.
There you go.
We enjoy seeing all these characters that have been built and sculpted and molded and changed, or perhaps just affected by the world around them, come to a final conclusion, and this entire season lacked that gravitas. It lacked that excitement. I wouldn't even say this is hype backlash because I wasn't that excited in the first place.
Whereas I felt like it was a fine finale.
It was a fine finale. It was a great way to go. You know what? If that was the last season, I would have said that's fun. That's great. That's a good way to tie it off. I'm glad we're not going any further. I'm afraid of what would come after.
Yeah, that's kind of the vibe. Let's go into specifics. We don't really necessarily need to break it down episode by episode. What would you say was like your favorite episode? Was it just the finale?
I don't know if that's true. I think that was the best episode. My favorite, ironically, might have been Guns for Hire. I liked the setting. I liked most of the guest stars. I liked Djarin being Djarin.
Yeah, he's gone through a lot of mellowing.
So, like, again, mea culpa. I'm on a soapbox today, and I don't feel that strongly about this. This isn't, me going on a really unwarranted rant against Jon Moxley. This is the Bo-Katan show now.
She really takes center stage for a big part of the season. A big part of the latter half of the season certainly basically functions as so there's different ways of looking about it. But I wanted to answer your point before I move forward.
Sure.
Din Djarin being Din Djarin. He's going through a lot of mellowing. He's much more chill about things. But it was nice to see him just straight up not trust any of these droids.
Sure.
That was nice. It was some good old-fashioned classic Mandalorian. Do you see what happens?
It was showing his character, which I don't feel like I saw for most of this season. We had a little bit of it in a pilot. We had a fair amount of it in this episode. It wasn't really a pilot, the first episode, and then a fair amount of it in this episode. Otherwise, he was just sort of Grogu's dad.
I feel like that's a natural evolution of the character, though.
And I'm not mad about it, and that's critical. I just don't like Bo-Katan. She's mean and up her own ass. At least coming into this series, in this season. So I wasn't exactly thrilled to see the character I liked that was the main character of the show. One could argue it's Grogu. He's certainly the most marketable. Relegated to a secondary role. And instead, it's Raiden here to save the day. I don't hate it. In fact, I like the arc she goes through, and I think she's got a couple of really relatable moments. I definitely like her more at the end of this season than I did at the beginning of it. But
you're not necessarily wrong. She is the one who goes through... She's the emotional center of this season.
Djarin's character development's done.
Yeah, Din's character development is done. He's Grogu's dad now.
Spoiler alert.
He comes to that final apotheosis at the end of the finale when he officially adopts Din Grogu, and I really liked that moment. That was a really good final beat for his character arc, as it were. And he has moments of character. It's not like he's just it's not like they've stripped him of personality, but the emotional center of the story, aside from his relationship with Grogu, which is a part of him as Grogu's dad being the main character trait he has, the emotional center is Bo-Katan and her emotional journey through reconnecting with the more fundamental parts of Mandalorian culture and coming into her own as a leader without feeling the need to rely on like a crutch of her lineage or the Darksaber or anything else. At the end of it, she leads the Mandalorians because she's Mandalore, not because, although they don't call her that, not because she has a special widget or her dad was important. It's because she is the leader. That's the kind of the emotional through line of much of the season.
which would be great and is, good. If I liked the character, I would enjoy it better. I don't. As someone who doesn't count as a Star Wars fan because I didn't watch all of the Filoni crap, don't have the pre-existing buy-in to this person who has basically done little other than be a bitch to the Mandalorian, to the main character. So I'm not excited to be like, yeah, she's finally getting hers. This great character who is good for reasons I don't know.
Well, but by contrast, I never watched this.
You've read Wikipedia articles about it, though.
So have you.
I have not.
Why not?
I don't like her.
Do you think maybe that if you took some time to invest, you would this might be rectified?
I only have so much time on this earth. I cannot fathom coming home from a movie, and unless I was like, I feel like I'm really missing something important here, looking up my least favorite character in a movie just to make sure I wasn't wrong about not liking them.
So that feels very much like a CinemaSins complaint.
Her hair is red. She is a bully.
It's very much a the books don't matter point of view. If there is further context available and you voluntarily choose not to at least attempt to engage with it, the material can't be fully blamed for you not being fully bought in.
Well, and I'm not necessarily sitting here blaming the material. They know what audience they're appealing to. It's the kids who grew up on this shit.
And me, I guess.
And you, who absorbed them through, internet sugar packets and now have the knowledge. But also me reading a Wikipedia article isn't going to give me the emotional beats of this character. It will give me facts. I would have to watch the entire fucking series to get it, and God, do I not want to. I don't like it.
We are different in that way.
Sure. And I am different from plenty of other viewers, I'm sure. And I will, again, I need to keep saying this because it is A, in contrary to my typical behavior, and B, I feel it is different. I don't want to misrepresent myself. I didn't hate this season. I didn't dislike this season. I just wasn't blown away by it. I didn't get picked up and taken on a journey like the other two seasons did.
I don't really have a lot to add to that. I guess my favorite episode was... I enjoyed Guns for Hire just because the cameos were fun. I will say they missed a trick by not having Christopher Lloyd's character frozen in carbonite. That's just... You missed it. You missed the boat. Yeah. Come on, man. It's
Had
right
him exiled.
There.
That's not good.
That's right. You could have frozen him in carbonite. He's right there. But one of the ones I liked a lot was the Foundling. I think it was. It wasn't the Convert. It wasn't the episode. Context is. Din Djarin starts this season desperately wanting to get to the living waters underneath the surface of Mandalore, because that way he can redeem himself and be cool with his religion again. Through a series of the first couple episodes, he gets to it. In the Convert, he and Bo end up both going into the water, and since by the time they get back to Din's covert, his group of Mandalorians, Bo-Katan hasn't taken off her helmet either, so the armorer welcomes her in to see what it's like to live in the old ways, as it were. That's sort of the end of the episode before the one I'm talking about, but you need that context. The Foundling is a really good episode that has a lot of good, fun world building around Mandalorians as like a culture. Specifically, Din's sub-faction, the Children of Death Watch, as it were. And it's a really powerful sort of emotional beat for Bo-Katan. of her being immersed in this more, culty and fundamentalist version of her culture. And finding it, drawing her in.
If these people weren't really cool Mandalorians, this would have been horrifying.
Yeah, look, Din Djarin isn't a cult. He is a cultist. These are just facts. He's got a very weird, restrictive religion that excommunicates you for taking off your hat. That's too far. That's culting. It just is.
Really, the difference between a cult and a religion is public perception. So,
spicy takes here in the Tune Ins podcast. But
prove me wrong in the comments, kids.
but comment, like, dislike. No one can see it.
I can, and it hurts my feelings.
Well, there you go. It would be horrifying if the cult she wasn't falling into wasn't super really cool Mandalorians, and also the leader of them, because the armor is indisputably the leader of that section of that covert. Even if I don't know if that's like her official position, kicks her out, or like uses her as a tool to modernize the rest of the cult. For the benefit of her people. And this leads me pretty naturally into talking about the Armorer, the coolest character in this season, minimum, and maybe in the show.
Once you take the average of all things happening, yeah. She's always been really cool, but I think she really stands out a lot in this season. She's, like you say, a good leader, and I like that. And not a leader of, like, being ostentatious, and more just a shepherd of the old ways. She feels like the oldest among them.
She probably is.
Yeah. I like the armor. Nothing wrong to say about the armor.
That's good.
Yeah.
So now that we've covered the season, favorite episodes, all that, I don't really have a lot else.
How did you feel about the episode that, despite the way you described it, had really nothing to do with anything?
Oh, you mean, what was it called?
The Convert. Because all of the stuff you described about the Convert happened in the first and last 10 minutes. The rest of the runtime of the Convert was about the clone scientist and an Imperial officer.
Oh, I guess that I thought of that as its own episode, but I guess it was sort of nestled in the middle of another episode.
Yeah, they didn't want to pull a Book of Boba Fett, so all of the episodes had
some Mandalorian in it.
Mm-hmm.
I liked it. It didn't feel like it fit very well.
It was a good piece of fiction.
Yeah, it was a good short story that someone taped to the inside of the novel I was reading.
And it does provide context for some stuff that happens later, but I don't know that we needed that context.
Well, alright. So the stuff it provides context for doesn't end up mattering that much.
Yeah.
Like, you could... They took most of an episode to, how to put this? To establish a villain that you could have established just as easily in like a 5-minute segment before she actually impacts the narrative.
Yes.
And to also,
they took a long time to do it, too. Like, it was just...
Well, they were using it for other world building.
And it wasn't... Yeah, they did a lot of great world building, and I think that's something that this season does really well, is it brings in the wider world of Star Wars.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons it feels so tonally different, because we have stuff that happens on Coruscant, and we get a bunch of world building for Coruscant, and we have stuff that, is very much about the New Republic, and we see some of the inner workings of their bureaucracy. And
we get space pirates featuring Muckman and Joe Eyeball.
You're gonna hate this. The creatures those space pirates are...
Huts? Is that the new Hutts?
No, they're Filoni guys.
Oh, I'm sure. No, I could tell. They're fine. I had no real opinion on them. It seemed sort of... Another thing that happened in this season that kind of brought me out of it was everything was too easy. So that by the time there was actually a sacrifice made from the roster, I didn't care. Does that make sense?
I don't know about not caring. I don't know about the second bit, but the first bit, that's part of the reason it felt more like Star Wars. Din just struggled less. Now, to be fair, he did get his ass kicked a lot.
Sure, but, like, the Mandalorians had everything in hand.
In general, like, it didn't... Alright, so a bunch of the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian basically involved, like, the Mandalorian, Din Djarin, being like a down-on-his-luck trucker?
Who also happens to be Golgo 13.
Yeah, who, like, was short on money and short on time and long on problems and always was, like, scraping by to get to the next part of what he needed to do. In this season, that's just not the case. He has some physical peril he's in. Most notably, one time he is in a lot of peril and has to be saved. But he's not in any logistical difficulty.
Yeah, even the last 2 episodes where I am told they are in logistical peril, it never really seems like it.
They don't make you feel it.
No. And that's the other thing, because the other 2 seasons, Djarin spends the entire time beating ass really awesomely. But the show also does a great job of putting him behind the 8 ball, so you do that.
He needs to be beating all this ass.
How is he going to get out of this one? How is it possible? And for me especially, personally, that is a trope that you have to walk that line with. Otherwise, I'm going to be bored. I mean, you're going to lose my investment so hard. And it's not out of, me being petulant. It's just like, I mean, yeah, there's like 20 stormtroopers, but they're stormtroopers.
I mean, he houses those for breakfast. It's not really a big deal.
Yeah. Don't you remember the part where there was all those super troopers and that was tough? This is not a big deal. You got like 50 Mandalorians. This is fine.
Now, to be fair, they did a good job establishing that these are extra double special good stormtroopers with Mandalorian armor. But they still did shoot like stormtroopers and die a little bit more difficult. Like, they took a few shots.
Sure.
So it's good that their armor works.
It felt less like, I'm going to keep that one to myself.
That's fair. But even still, like, we do eventually lose a prominent character from the previous couple seasons as, like, a big heroic sacrifice. I felt like that was a really good moment.
It was fine. I wanted to be heartbroken by it, though. Instead of being like, well, that's too bad.
Well, you wanted, but you weren't, because you knew it was probably gonna be all right.
Overall, sure.
Yeah. But they didn't do as much to buy you into the peril, and they waited too long to get to that point in the story.
Yes, I agree on both ends.
They didn't have enough runtime, because, like, we're grown-ups, we're adults.
Sure.
We can look at the runtime and go, well, I mean, this looks bad, but they're going to have this shit wrapped up in 30 minutes tops. So they waited too long to get to the very deeply perilous part of the story, which makes sense because they had a lot of stuff to fit in. A lot of world building about the Mandalorians, of which a fair portion was just pulling shit back in from the extended universe and from pulling shit out from the Clone Wars. But they had to get it back on screen, establish it, and then they had a bunch of world building on Coruscant and then all that other stuff we talked about to do. So they didn't have a bunch of time left, I presume, in their, pre-established 8 episodes they wanted to do, to really let us sit on Mandalore and establish the peril that they were in, establish that they are in danger, that they might not be able to make it out.
And on reflecting on that, and feeling that and looking back and seeing how much time we dedicated to this short dystopian sci-fi story about Pelimato, I wonder if we could have maybe not spent as much time on that.
I liked the world building they put in. It was a good short story. I'm torn because I don't really want them to have cut it because I liked it. But at the same time, if they couldn't have another episode for it, maybe they had to. Maybe this was a kill your darlings sort of thing.
And maybe it was. Like, it didn't ultimately amount... This wasn't the thing that was going to make me go, yes, Mandalorian Season 3 was phenomenal. You know, in either direction. It's not, I'm sitting here going too much Peli, and I'm not sitting here going, if only this last couple episodes felt more dangerous. Maybe if the pirates had felt more dangerous, and it felt like there was a reason that we went through that. Especially when the quest reward, as it were, that we got from defeating the pirates was immediately purposeless.
I feel like the pirates were there to establish, Moff Gideon and give them some being around still, and give them some mooks to fight.
Yeah.
You just to give them some mooks to fight, to have the combined Mandalorian and Bo-Katan thing. Give them some battle they can get into. Get their feet wet. Establish them and establish how cool and good that section of Mandalorians is before you combine them into one big hyper line.
Is that not what we had in the Foundling, though?
No, that was a much more they fought a raptor guy.
This is a tough one, though.
It was pretty tough.
They had a hard time.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I don't make a show. I don't have a show. I talk about fighting games and podcasts.
This is still... The Mandalorian is still the best Star Wars movie. I'm still pretty firm on that. The Mandalorian is still the best Star Wars movie.
I will say this. I liked Obi-Wan better than this season. By a lot.
I did too.
Yeah. It spent more time in the gritty parts of Star Wars. And maybe that's another thing, is part of the reason I like the first two seasons so much is I like dirty-ass Star Wars. I like the junk and the jank and the, all the people who are down on their luck. And everything is looking up.
Yeah, he's looking up. His stock is rising in the world. He pretty much has almost this whole season, he has a full... a logistical crowd behind him.
Sure.
There's support, and he can call on backup, and there's a fleet.
Well, and even in small ways, Greef Karga and Navarra are moving up in the world. We visit a planet that is very beautiful and palatial and paradisical. There's not a lot of that trapped in a prison ship kind of stuff. There's not a lot of... I can't remember the man's name, the comedian guy.
Bill Burr.
Thank you. His broken-ass character trying to make good. We don't get that here.
We don't get a lot of the really deep emotional moments that make the first two seasons of The Mandalorian really good. And the lack of struggle is a part of it. He goes from being a down-on-his-luck space trucker / bounty hunter, just trying to make his way in the world and take care of his boy, to major domo to a warlord?
Yeah. it has literally become, hey, do you want to take back our ancestral homeland? We can do that? Sure. And they did.